F1 on BBC Radio 5 Sports Extra.
Formula One comes to the Sunshine City for round 5 of the 2023 Formula One World Championship. A fast, unique layout around the Hard Rock Stadium, dominated by long straights and a tight and twisty middle sector, is home for this weekend's Miami Grand Prix, the first of 3 US races on the calendar. Welcome to live coverage of Free Practice One. My name is Harry Benjamin. Alongside me is former Formula One driver Jolyon Palmer. And Jolyon, we're back for a second time in Miami. The track's been completely resurfaced and Sergio Perez is on some good form.
He is. We've got a title battle on our hands potentially after the opening 4 races. 2 wins apiece between the 2 Red Bulls. Surely they are marching away with the championship, but never say never in a long season. Upgrades to the Ferrari car are going to be the key thing to look out for today. They've bought a new floor, hope to get Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz back towards the front to try and stop the Bulls. But yeah, it's another wall line circuit, let's call it, Miami, and Perez is pretty good at those.
And the track's also been completely resurfaced as well, so something for the drivers to get to grip with. You mentioned upgrades, Ferrari bringing stuff, Aston Martin, Alfa Romeo, Haas, AlphaTauri, all bringing little bits and pieces. Ferrari seemingly making gains last time around in Baku, but still not quite able to close that big gap that we have to the top team of Red Bull. But it's looking promising than it was a few weeks ago.
Well, I don't think we saw that Leclerc would take a double pole a few weeks ago, and then he did it in Baku last weekend. So definitely the one lap pace of the Ferrari looked better in the hands of Leclerc. Sainz was a fair way adrift in Baku last time out, so he's got his own troubles to try and get on top of to match his teammate and then match the Red Bull. The Red Bull is just so good in the race trim. That's what we won't particularly see much in this session, but later on in FP2 we'll get a better line of what's going on with the Red Bull v the Ferrari, maybe Mercedes. But yeah, Ferrari race pace, that's been the big weakness, and it was so evident last time out.
Well, we have our man down on the pit lane to give us all the insider knowledge. New voice is making his debut on BBC Radio 5 Live. Christian Hugo. Hi, Christian.
Hello, Harry. How are you? Thank you for having me. It's lovely to be down in the pit lane and currently outside the Williams garage of Logan Sargent, about to take his first wheel turns on the most home of home circuits for Logan Sargent. He grew up about a 20-minute drive from the Hard Rock Stadium, the home of the Miami Dolphins, of course, and he regularly would be found in the grandstands of the Hard Rock Stadium cheering on the Miami Dolphins, and now he finds himself racing around it in Formula One. And as his team, it looks like he might be coming out fairly early because his team are sort of scurrying around the car already, and as they do, in the sky above us are 2 planes with a well-known battery provider, shall we say, flying Go On Logan on a flyby, flying high above the grandstands here in Miami. So our first home race for the 2023 rookie Logan Sargent.
Absolutely. Well, the sun is beating down in Miami. Temperatures approaching 30 degrees centigrade. Track temperature nearly at 50 degrees. Every single driver near on has a special kind of helmet. It's pretty much a mixture of teal and red and palm trees across them all. Logan Sargent, of course, being the home driver, the first American driver to race in a US Grand Prix since Alexander Rossi in 2015 when he was with Marussia. And Christian makes the point that Logan Sargent, a local boy from Fort Lauderdale, which is about a 20-30 minute drive from this track, which heads around the Hard Rock Stadium, home of the Miami Dolphins, the NFL team. In fact, when Logan Sargent first went karting, it was just down the road in Homestead Miami Speedway. So Logan Sargent, the home hero, big pressure and somewhat abated maybe a little bit in Baku. It was the first time he got into Q2, so decent promise. They've shown flashes of pace. He was stellar in Bahrain, Logan Sargent. I think he improved on everybody's expectations, perhaps, but there's room to go for Logan.
He's got some pace, we know that. He showed decent pace coming through the ranks in Formula 3, Formula 2. He's just been a little bit wild through 4 races so far. He's had a couple of crashes. Getting into Q2 was great in Baku, but he did it with a crash as well. So he's had a solid start.
Fast like the chief, baby.
Coffee, champ. Thanks.
Well, Gasly just getting some pre-practice checks in there.
That was classic F1 showbiz. We come to Miami, and there was, I think it was one of the Miami Dolphins on the team radio to Pierre Gasly before FP1. There we go. You know you're in the States, don't you, when that's happening. But for Logan Sargent, this is particularly a home race because he's from Fort Lauderdale. About half an hour, 45 minutes away from the circuit. So he can almost stay at home and come in each time here. The 3 US Grand Prix, of course. Vegas is on the calendar. We've still got Austin. But this is the true home race for Sargent. And I think it comes at a good time for him. Race 5, decent pace so far. It's time to put a weekend together.
Yeah, well, certainly a lot of people cheering on Logan Sargent as the green light comes on at the end of the pit lane, and we are go for this free practice 1 session. Cars out on track. Aston Martin heading out as well. 59 minutes on the clock and 30, 29, 28, 27 for those syncing up. Christian down in the pit lane. What's the atmosphere like as FP1 finally gets going and cars are on the track?
Yeah, plenty of people going out early doors, including the man we were just talking about, Logan Sargent, who is going to be heading out as soon as the AlphaTauri in the garage next door has passed. And I sort of get the impression with Logan at Williams that it's a case of putting it all together. You're right in what he's saying. There was big flashes of speed in Bahrain. I think it was in Saudi Arabia that he would have made it comfortably through to Q2, and they felt they had the pace to potentially put Logan into Q3 there, had he had not drifted over the pit exit line and got himself thrown out of qualifying. So I think Logan will be looking to sort of put it all together because, listen, Williams rate Logan. I heard a lot of talk over the winter that this is a guy put in almost for showbiz purposes to, the American side of the sport, and Williams, we know Nicholas Latifi bought a lot of sponsorship with him, but the impression I get from Williams is that they really rate Logan Sargent. They really think there's pace in Logan, so I think he'll hope to sort of put it all together this weekend, and he's just gone past me out in FP1 already.
Well, let's see how he gets on then as he heads out. His teammate Alex Albon sporting a golf ball inspired helmet, one of the many drivers to bring some unique helmet designs. Red Bull as well with their own unique livery as they make their round on track. But Johnny, I just want to bring up the resurfacing of the track. It's been entirely resurfaced since last year. What does that actually do? What can they expect?
It's really difficult to know. Generally, when you have a resurfaced track, it can actually be quite slippery at first. It's a very smooth surface, so it's not giving a huge amount of grip, but the drivers were very unhappy with the surface last year around the circuit. The racing line rubbered in after a while, and then it's meant that offline was really horrible. As soon as people got a dip the wheel off the racing line, there was just no grip out there, and on top of it, in spite of any of the racing line or anything, the track was actually breaking up in part, so it needed some on-the-hop replacement. So it's basically just sturdying up the asphalt for everyone is object number one, and then try and give it a little bit of grip. It looked very, very smooth out there from our early pictures. You can tell it's been resurfaced.
Yeah, Christian, what are you hearing about the track?
I actually spoke to Lando Norris about it yesterday, and it was one of the first things he brought up when we had a conversation. He said that last year, the lack of grip on what he called the low-quality tarmac really didn't help the drivers, and he really thought that the new tarmac he said you'd be able to notice it within a quarter of a lap. He was hoping that it would mean the drivers would ultimately have more grip and have more confidence in the car. Obviously, the Miami Grand Prix last year, it wasn't a classic, and Formula One will be hoping for a more exciting race. And Lando seemed to think that this resurfacing, as much as it might sound insignificant, actually might help us get a better show on Sunday in terms of race-wise, because the drivers will simply have more confidence.
Yeah, really good point.
I hope so. I hope the drivers can lean on it. A lot of corners, particularly the first sector, quite fast sweeping corners. Turn 2, Kevin Magnussen coming through in the Haas now, left and then right. Arcs you all the way through with a series of S-bends down towards turn 6, 7 and 8. A triple apex left-hander where we saw a couple of drivers end in the wall at various points last year. Here's Russell.
Got vibration on the rack as well.
Loud and clear. Okay, on the steering, we'll have a look.
Can we make this any change for the second run? Or even now?
Negative. Nothing in session that we think we can do about this.
Even if it takes half an hour?
Well, the sound you're hearing is on board with George Russell, complaining already about vibrations. Not the positive start he would have wanted to the first session in Miami.
No, he was rapid in practice as well last year in Miami. Had a decent race. It was a bit of a move forward for Mercedes last season, this one, but not a good start for him. 5 minutes into this session, and Russell complaining of some vibration through the steering then, not coming through the tyres, presumably. It must be as he's turning the wheel, he can feel it through the steering column, and wants a change, even if it takes half an hour out of this 1 hour sessions. That shows how dramatic it is for Russell.
Just seeing Max Verstappen in his Red Bull running deep into turn 1, runoff area used and back on again, no trouble at all in that slightly revitalised Red Bull livery, which has been a part
I'm really
of
struggling with this steering, mate. I'm not going to learn anything with this.
Okay, copy that. We'll keep discussing.
Yeah, so George Russell with even more pain, really struggling with the steering. Almost doesn't feel like he can get anything out of this session. Early doors, still 54 minutes on the clock.
That sounds like an installation issue at Mercedes. We're in the first laps of the weekend, and Russell is saying, look, there's no point me being out here because I just can't get any feedback. And when you're sitting in the car, we've actually only had 14 drivers head out. There's still 6 in the pit lane, but those that are out on track, you're immediately feeling the grip, as Christian was saying. Lando Norris talking about the new resurfaced track. You want to get a feeling for that, and a lot of that comes either through your body being strapped in and the feeling underneath you, or it comes the feedback in your steering is so crucial. And Russell is now back in the pits. He's obviously not happy at all. He's just saying, look, it's pointless me being out there. I cannot learn anything. So he is one of the 6 now in the box.
Yeah, the engineers and mechanics getting to work, tyre warmers on that car. George Russell plugged back in to the TV and the wires that come down as he sits in his cockpit, has a chat to his engineer, and they have a little fiddle with the steering. Max Verstappen has just set the fastest lap time, a 1:34.054. The sound you're hearing is his teammate Sergio Perez in the sister Red Bull, who's doing what Verstappen did about a lap ago, and braking a little bit late into turn 1, running out wide, gets it back out on the track though. So early days in this free practice 1 session. 53 minutes and 21, 20, 19, 18 seconds for those who want to sing.
I can't move my head, man.
Copy. It's all go on the radio this morning. Logan Sargent, I can't move my head. Well, you don't want to move it too much in a Formula 1 car.
No, but you want to be able to move it enough to be looking in towards your apexes, and Sargent is the sound you can hear as he's oversteering his way through turn 2. The left-hander, which is after the right-hander, where both Red Bulls have slithered off the road already. So the track grip, I mean, it's FP1, it's always going to be low on a circuit that's not used for 363 days of the year. But it's looking particularly low right now.
Yeah, well, Verstappen is fastest 1:34.0. Give you a bit of context. The pole time was a 1:28.7 from Leclerc last year. So still plenty of time for the track to rubber in. It's Verstappen, Hamilton, Perez, Stroll and Ocon, the top 5. Gasly, Magnussen, Leclerc, Albon, Hulkenberg, the top 10. The sound you're hearing is Logan Sargent, the home racer for Williams, as we look back at his newly redesigned helmet with a bit of pink and a bit of blue, and the Miami palm trees there, following the Red Bull through that really tricky, tight and twisty middle sector. You come into 13, then it's a quick left-right in 14 and 15 before you get to a nearly 90-degree left-hander that brings you onto that really long 1.28 kilometre straight. DRS zone slightly shortened. In fact, both DRS zones here out of the 3 have been shortened slightly. So was Baku, Jolyon. And there's been a lot of talk as to, well, Baku wasn't as exciting as we all wanted it. Why are we reducing the DRS zones?
Well, it's been decided before the weekend what they're going to do with the DRS zones, and it was decided based on previous data on overtaking, and it's a tool to use to overtake. So if you're within a second of the car ahead, you can open the flap in the rear wing with the DRS and get more speed and try and make an overtake. But you don't want to make it too easy. You want people to fight it out in the corners and not just drive by on the straight. We've got a yellow flag out in the middle sector.
We ride on board with Max Verstappen. Let's see if this is the calls for it. Into the left-hander, and this is the reason for the yellow flag? No, nothing too suspicious at the moment. Makes the right-hander corner afterwards. The car in front of him. It's a tackling with the wheel.
Double yellow out there. Let's see if there's someone who has stopped in the middle sector, because it's still there. That was Verstappen just going around an AlphaTauri through turn 12, so there was nothing in that moment. Leclerc's had a little run wide as well, but that's not the reason for the yellow flag, and it's clear now anyway, so would have just been a small moment for someone, maybe a spin.
I wonder if it was Nick de Vries, which is the sound you're hearing now, as you ride on board with him. He was stationary on the driver tracker for a momentary minute, and was this the reason why? Just loses the rear end and round he goes, manages to keep it out of the wall, and the Alpine finds its way through, but a bit of a spin for the AlphaTauri driver, who manages to get it spun back around, and off he goes again, but a little bit of a heart-in-mouth moment for Nick de Vries there.
At turn 12, long right-hander, de Vries just coaxing it in to the 180-degree right-hander, and the rear end just letting go. So again, more examples of this is a low grip surface right now, and de Vries, I think he kept it out the wall. There's not a lot of room for error there. It's not particularly high speed, which is why he managed to pirouette the car and not back it into the wall. Imagine if he's hitting the wall in the first 10 minutes. Nick de Vries, we speak about Logan Sargent needing a clean weekend, but de Vries is a man already coming under some pressure. That's not the start that he needed.
Yeah, currently in the bottom of the standings is Nick de Vries, no points to his name, one of the rookies in the field. George Russell is out of the car, and his teammate's going quickly though at the moment. Jolien?
Yeah, Hamilton fastest in the first sector, goes around Lando Norris as he hits the brakes for turn 11, the left-hander. Turn 12, where de Vries had a spin moments ago, Hamilton hugs the apex a lot more than de Vries did. Maybe de Vries got a little wide, and that's what caused the car to go as well. And de Vries has actually been noted for dangerous driving. He's being investigated for dangerous driving, so that must be with how he returned to the circuit then. He was pointing the wrong way. It was pretty narrow to turn it around. We had a yellow flag for some time. I wonder if he's driven a little bit the wrong way, or he's done a spin turn to get it round right in front of someone else.
Well, it's almost a bit of a blind right-hander when you come in if you're spinning. But let's see, the Vries noted for that one. The sound you're hearing is Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes. He ride on board as he comes out of the final corner, and the slight right-hand kick, and across the line he goes fastest, the 1:32.9. The same cannot be said though for his teammate George Russell. We last saw him in the garage. He's since got out of the car, complaining with vibrations and steering issues. Christian, what can you tell us?
He got straight out of the car as soon as it arrived back in the garage. George was out, the front wing was off, and I tell you what, I don't think Mercedes would have for a moment expected to be so busy this early in a free practice session. We've got Mercedes just moving the scrum of photographers away from his garage. He at first was actually with the guys who were underneath the car, crouched down looking at the front end of his car once the front wing had been taken off. He then scurried away to the back of the garage, and as I can see him now, in deep conversation with the team around him, looking at the computers. So I wouldn't say it's quite frantic at Mercedes, but it isn't far off. It's certainly busy as a crowd of people huddle around the car trying to get it better for George, so they can make something out of this free practice session for George Russell.
Yeah, well, the beauty, I suppose, of this weekend compared to last week is they get a few more practice sessions under their belt to deal with issues and to tinker with setup. But still, not the best start for George Russell. We're watching Lando Norris at the moment make his way around on track, but he's still in the pits. Zhou Guanyu was also one of the cars that was late out of the pits in the Alfa Romeo. He is now on an outlap. Here's Verstappen.
Yeah, it's very hit and miss, like 1 millimeter of line, and
So that's, I think, exactly maybe what happened to de Vries then. He did get a little bit wide on turn 12, and as Max has just voiced, you go wide, you have no grip, and that's exactly what happened last year as well. The racing line gets rubbered in, and then anywhere else, you're just sliding. We've seen a lot of incidents so far in the first 14 minutes. Only de Vries has actually fully spun the car, but many drivers have gone deep into corners, used the runoff area, had big moments. Charles Leclerc, we jump on board with missing an apex down at the final corner as well. He drives to the line on his hard-shod Ferrari, and he goes fifth behind Alonso, Perez, Hamilton and Verstappen at the top.
Yeah, on the white-walled hard tyre. Verstappen also going fastest with the white-walled hard. Hamilton, Alonso, Ocon, Magnussen, Norris, Sargent, Piastri on the medium tyre at the moment. Home race for Haas, and gone with a slightly different livery upgrade, but only to the overalls, slightly greyer, as Kevin Magnussen locks up, coming into turn number 17, and then out through 18 and 19, really clattering the curves in that tricky middle sector as well of 14 and 50, which has been slightly altered, but nothing too manic. But it's still, this track goes from one extreme to the other, really, in Miami. It's super wide, super long, and then you get that really tricky final sector. It's a tough one to deal with, on top of the temperature that the drivers have to deal with as well.
Yeah, drivers are really banging over the curbs at 14.15. The left-right, which comes just after De Vries's spin corner at 12. It's really narrow there, and Hamilton, when he went to the top of the times, really did bounce over those curves at turn 15, launched the car, the floor clattering over the curbs as well. Looked a pretty quick way to do it, and so it was on the times, but you'll feel that from the cockpit. And Magnussen will probably feel his tyres as well now, because he had a big lock-up at 17, end of the second DRS zone, and hit the brakes straight into a monster left front lock, ran wide. And I don't know if he's going to get anything more out of those tyres. No, he's come straight back into the pit, says K-Mag. So another driver that needs to find a bit of pace.
Yeah, I'm hearing, I don't know how true this is, that he's under quite a lot of pressure, some sort of 4-race time frame to prove himself for a seat for next year, which to me doesn't seem quite right. Nico Hülkenberg has had the advantage very much so in qualifying, but Kevin Magnussen has been there or thereabouts in race pace, and I feel like they're both in very different stages of, well, they're both in the same stage of their career, whereas they've come back. It's almost a bit of fun for them, right?
Yeah, they couldn't be more in the same stage of their career, could they, really? I don't know if you'd ever say driving in Formula One is a bit of fun for anyone. Maybe Kimi Räikkönen in his last
for those
days.
Last few years.
Yeah, driving around in the back, having had the career he's had. I think, anything's a bonus for Hülkenberg and Magnussen, having had a year out or 3 years out for Hülkenberg. And I think they were at peace both with being out of Formula One the first time. So I'm surprised that, has Magnussen really got 4? I don't believe he's got 4 races.
How true that is.
We've had 4 this year. He's had a couple of decent races. Baku actually wasn't so bad for him. He was quicker than Hülkenberg in the sprint. Had a lot of bad luck missed most of his only practice session. So Baku wasn't too bad. He got the point in Jeddah, which was good. Had a beautiful move on Yuki Tsunoda to get that.
The thing that skews it is Nico Hülkenberg's Australian Grand Prix result, which of course was a bit of luck with him and that crazy chaotic ending, but still he was up there on the pace.
Yeah, Hülkenberg was classed in Melbourne anyway. Would have had a good haul of points regardless. Nico's just, it's rapid and one lap, and that's the headline is Hülkenberg's one lap pace, and every weekend we're getting to it, and Baku was a little bit more underwhelming from him, but generally he's putting his stunning laps in the Haas, and that's where Magnussen's got to up his game. Race pace is much closer between the two, but you're always compared to your teammate. Qualifying is the just classic benchmark of how fast are you in your Formula One car, and that's where the Magnussen pressure's coming.
Yeah, well, in the qualifying head-to-heads, it's 4-0 to Hülkenberg at the moment, but the race is a different story. 3-1 going Magnussen's way. So still, I think a little bit of time. He's got a bit of time left, and we all know, I feel like Gunther Steiner does know what he's got there with Kevin Magnussen. A bit of a known quantity for him. Alex Albon out on track, making his way through that left-right tight 14 and 15, nearly loses the back end. In fact, he does lose it, manages to hold on to it, kicks up the dust offline, but somehow Jolyon kept that going in a straight line.
Speedway coming out of turn 15 for Albon, really dusty as he was opposite locking his way through the exit of the tightest corner on the circuit, and again narrow rules aligning the exit, but actually it was a beautiful drift. If you're getting points for performance, that would be pretty good, but it's all about speed, and it wasn't very quick for Albon.
Yeah, he found a bit of time there and moves himself up into 6th. I don't know how he found that time there. He's 1.6 seconds, so he found a good chunk of points there. 1:33.4 in the end for Albon.
Yeah, he lost a quarter of a second in the middle sector with the most almighty drift. I don't know how he managed to do a decent lap with all of that. So he got a little bit wide coming out of 15, and then it was scrabbling around to try and get back to the right-hand side for 16, and got offline, and as Max has said, he got offline, it's very slippery. He was trying to do that, dumping 1,000 horsepower at his right foot, and had a big oversteer, and somehow managed to keep it in, get it stopped for the next corner and complete the lap. So
he had a blistering first sector, that was why, nearly 7.5 tenths up on the quickest time. So Albon going rapid in that Williams.
More pace in there. Teammate to Logan Sargent, the American on his home race. That's a lot of potential in that car. Verstappen top by 7 tenths from Leclerc, both on hard tyres. Hamilton's in the pits on the mediums in 3rd, 1.1 seconds back. Carlos Sainz is on a flyer right now. man that needs to find a little bit of pace, coming through 14, 15, slowing it down through 16 and punching out, and he'll get the DRS up towards 17.
Yeah, Carlos Sainz, the only driver in the top 6 of the standings at the moment who was yet to get onto the podium. His teammate doing that last time around, and that was his first podium for Ferrari in Baku last weekend. And the sound you're hearing is Carlos Sainz in the scarlet red Ferrari coming round the long left-hander of 17. Pit lane entry to your right as you go through 18, the right-hand kink of 19, which brings you back onto the main straight. Loses a little bit of time in that final sector and is 5th.
I lost a heap of time. Waved goodbye to the apex as we joined him on board there, down to 17, where Magnussen had his big lock-up. It's very, very tricky to get the car in there. Fernando Alonso is doing a better job of it in the Aston Martin. He's done the fastest first sector of anyone. Fernando, medium tyres on that car, and he jumps to 3rd.
If you have any questions, any comments, want to get in touch, hashtag BBC F1, and we will try to get to them. One of the main talking points coming out of last weekend in Azerbaijan, Jolyon, was it was a bit of a boring race, right? And focus turns to why is there a bit of a lack of overtaking seemingly this year? We're into a second year now of these new regulation overhauls and the ground effect era coming in. But, I mean, a bit of a blunt question. Do you think it's too early to decide whether they have worked, or has it simply not worked?
What, the ground effect?
Well, in terms of getting more exciting racing,
come
right?
on.
Is that not what we all wanted? I think we had such high expectations coming in last year, and I'm not sure they've really been met. Or are we hitting the panic button?
Really? You serious?
What? Take it away.
We've had some fantastic duels on circuit. Think about the Verstappen-Leclerc battles last year. Think about some of the pass and repass stuff that we've had. This year, not so much, but also we've had some amazing overtakes. Fernando Alonso charging through in Bahrain, diving to the inside of Lewis Hamilton at turn 10. A corner that you can't normally overtake on, and Alonso was through. Past Carlos Sainz coming out of there. We've had some reasonable action in the other Grand Prix as well, but Baku was...
Is it just a bit of a... It was less than what we expected in Baku because we're so used to exciting races in Baku, so we hit the panic button a little bit with that one.
Well, you know, Baku also, there's a few things in play. First of all, Baku often isn't that fantastic a race, but we've had some iconic moments that make it seem like it is. When Hamilton had his brake magic on and went off with 2 laps to go in the mad dash to the restart, it was a pretty boring race. Verstappen had it 1, Perez was 2nd, it was a Red Bull 1-2, and then Max had a puncture. And we remember the chaos at the end, and Gasly's on the podium, and Vettel's on the podium, and Perez takes a win, and it's wild. But actually, that wasn't a brilliant Baku with the old regs in 2021. We've had some stale Bakus. It's not always a thriller. So judging Baku as a slight snooze fest this year, I think it's a bit harsh. And I didn't mind it. We still had drivers within a second a lot of the time, pushing each other. Hamilton behind Sainz, Alonso caught Leclerc, couldn't quite do enough about them. And they're pretty evenly matched cars. If you take Red Bull out of the season, it's an absolute thriller. It's an absolute belter this season between Aston Martin, Ferrari and Mercedes. They'd have all have won races. You'd have had Alonso winning, you'd have had Hamilton winning, Leclerc would have won. It would be a belter. But Red Bull have just turned up this year with a phenomenal car, and when they're winning the race by 20 seconds, not racing each other too hard, even though I enjoyed the fight between Perez and Verstappen with a couple of seconds split in Baku, but the way they were pushing was quite fun.
Christian,
I think you're being a bit of a...
Am I being a bit too
Harry?
pessimistic, Christian? What do you think?
Personally, I'm Team Palmer on this one. I think you are potentially being a little bit pessimistic. I was talking to Nico Hülkenberg about this yesterday. He said, from his perspective, it is more difficult, and him and Kevin Magnussen, spoke to both of them, said it is more difficult to overtake than last year. But obviously Kevin has that experience from last year. Nico drove a couple of races at the start of the season too. But they weren't too negative about the rules in general. It was just, it's a little bit more difficult to overtake this year, but still better than it has been in the past. So I'm sort of with Jolyon on this one. I think that actually the first 3 Grand Prix of the season I thoroughly enjoyed, and I know a lot of people said about Baku that yes, the drama at the front, but I didn't think Baku was a classic. But yes, I think the drivers that I spoke to at Haas yesterday definitely seemed to think that there's reason to be cheerful, even if it is a little bit more difficult than last year. And just to throw back to something that we were talking about at the very start of the programme, when I spoke to Lando Norris yesterday, he said that they're hopeful that they'd go out and this new surface would, within, he said, a quarter of a lap, bring them more of a feeling of grip on this surface. Well, McLaren have just told me that Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris both reporting exactly the opposite. A lack of grip and still really slidey, which would absolutely make sense considering the moments we've seen Nick de Vries and Alex Albon have. So the new surface isn't at this stage, early doors of course, giving us the grip that perhaps the drivers had hoped it would.
Looks much the same with seeing the cars. Bottas has had a big lock-up as well down at 17. Remember in Jeddah, when Fernando Alonso led the race for Aston Martin, Perez came through in a car that was a lot quicker, and Alonso could stay lap after lap within DRS for, I don't know, half a dozen laps in a much slower car. That's a decent following ability of a Formula One car.
Yeah, don't get me wrong, absolutely. And I am being a bit pessimistic. I am trying to play the devil's advocate slightly. But I expected a little bit more. I wanted a little bit more. I wanted more, not just one good overtake or a couple of good one-on-one overtakes. I wanted to see multiple teams fighting it down into turn one. You know, now we have that midfield gaggle, which has always been close, regardless of the regulations, right? But now a midfield team having a stellar result, really, they're only able to steal a point for P10, because if the others are there, if you've got your Aston Martins, your Mercedes, your McLarens, Ferraris, so they're all still in the race, they're kind of lining us third for the rest of the points paying positions, but there's no interesting manoeuvres going on. There's no cool stories.
Harry, flip it round. We've got Aston Martin fighting for podiums. So yeah, a McLaren on a perfect weekend can only be 9th, but an Aston Martin now can be 3rd, whereas last year maybe they could be 7th. It's good to have more teams fighting towards the front. The thing is, Red Bull are just out. They're clear out front, aren't they? So they're 1-2 at the moment. Hopefully, they've got a reduced amount of wind tunnel time to try and develop the car, and hopefully the field will all close up behind the two Red Bulls. And Leclerc taking a double pole was a step forward last time out, but still the race pace and the DRS straight line speed is a monster for Red Bull. No one could defend against them. But beyond that, we've got a brilliant fight in the what would be the front pack with everyone else, and then the midfield pack is still so tight. I think that the doom is coming from Red Bull just being so good, and you've got to give them a bit of credit for that as well.
And, well, if he continues this kind of pace, it will really be an interesting race. Nico Hülkenberg in the Haas has just set an absolute belter. It's gone fastest for 1:31.3. Kevin Magnussen, his teammate, is also going well too. The two Haas's, Christian, running very well. Hülkenberg, with 32 minutes on the clock, sits first.
Well, this is another thing I like about this year, in that there's no obvious back markers. We've been in a position in previous years where Haas have been comfortably the slowest in the Mazepin-Schumacher year, and then Williams have been comfortably the slowest. But this year it does feel like, obviously, maybe you'd say AlphaTauri and Williams are the overall slowest, but on a good weekend they're capable of getting points. And you've certainly seen what Alex Albon can do in dragging the car up the field. And that's another thing I quite like. Just on the regulations, the point you guys were making, it reminded me of a conversation I had with Fernando Alonso in Bahrain 2022, the first race with the new regulations. And Fernando, driving for Alpine at the time, said to me the thing he thought about these regulations was that if a team was a good chunk behind, it would be possible to make up more time more quickly. Little did he know at the time, despite sitting in Alpine colours, he was describing exactly what would go on to happen at Aston Martin. And when I was talking to Carlos Sainz yesterday, he was saying, listen, this weekend, OK, qualifying, we're looking OK, but we are still not expecting to be up race pace-wise with Red Bull, but playing the long game towards the end of the season. There does seem to be some genuine optimism from Aston Martin and Ferrari in particular that they can close the gap. So as Jolien was saying, the Aston Martin jump forward should be a promising sign for closing the gap to the Red Bulls, to those of us that want a more closer fight at the front.
Yeah, there's definitely a sign that the rules are working, and the way that, as you say, Christian, the whole field is tightening up. Sargentson and Williams this weekend that may score a point. In fact, it's the first year in Formula One history that all the teams have scored a point after 3 races. That's quite nice in modern Formula One, that anyone can turn up and think they got a chance of points, which hasn't really been the case for the last few years. There's a lot of positives this season. I know people have made a big reaction because Baku missed a few overtakes. There was a bit of a train going around. But overall, I think it's okay. It's just that Red Bull have built a monster and everyone's going to have to take a bit of time to catch them up.
All right, fair enough.
And I'm going to throw one more thing in there.
Go on then.
We've even got a nice dynamic between the two Red Bull drivers.
Yes.
So considering Red Bull have built a monster, at least it's 2 apiece between Perez and Verstappen, and we've got a championship on our hands at this early stage. Perez has been driving really, really well.
Yep, just 6 points between them, as you say, 2 apiece when it comes to the wins at the moment. This is free practice 1 here in Miami. 30 minutes on the clock at 9, 8, 7, 6 seconds for those who are wishing to sync up. Nico Hülkenberg in the Haas has the fastest lap time at 1:31.3. Should point out though that is on the red soft tyre. Then it's Verstappen in second. He's heading out on an outlap now, just warming up his hard set of tyres. Then it's Magnussen, Leclerc, Alonso the top 5, Hamilton, Perez, Ocon, Piastri, Sainz the top 10, Albon, Stroll, Sargent, who's just come back into the pits, is 13th in front of Tsunoda, Norris, Bottas, Gasly, Zhou, De Vries and George Russell. Out of the pits after a lot of issues at the start of this session with vibrations and the steering.
Good news for Russell is to be back on circuit. A lot of cars now flying into soft tyre runs. Max Verstappen on a lap here, coming through turn 3. Looks okay through the first sector. Managed to get it stopped nicely for turn 1. Verstappen on a soft. We've got Leclerc still in the pits, but Perez is starting a soft tyre lap just behind him as well. Alonso is also in an out lap, so there the cars will watch out. Looks like a big gain is possible on the softs as Verstappen exits turn 8. The triple apex left. He's 3 tenths down on Nico Hülkenberg in the first sector.
Even on the soft tyre, that was an absolute belter from Nico Hülkenberg, the German driver, currently in the top 10 of the drivers' standings with that 7th place finish in Australia, bagging him a heap of points. Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez now out on track, setting fast lap times, personal best first sector. Alex Albon currently has the fastest final sector, so Albon down in 4th at the moment, just half a second from Hülkenberg. So the Williams certainly going on at these early stages. Verstappen finding time in the middle sector, fastest of anybody so far.
But he's still 800 down on Hülkenberg. There's a sound you can hear now, is it? Verstappen heading towards turn 17, big braking zone. Well, a lot of people have locked up and gone straight on. Does Max hit the brakes and get it turned in? Yes, he does, very nicely on his softs. That should have been a good sector with the DRS for the Red Bull, and he'll get a little flick of it as well as he drives to the line right now to try and depose Hülkenberg of top spot, and he does it by 3 tenths in the end.
Verstappen goes to the top then. Sergio Perez coming through as well. Round the final corner, the sound you're hearing is Sergio Perez. He is 3rd, half a second adrift, 1:31.5 for his teammate. But the top 4 is Verstappen, Hülkenberg, Perez, Magnussen, all on that soft tyre for now. But good lap from Verstappen. As did he run a little bit deep into one of the corners? Oh, gets a snap on the steering wheel coming through the left-hander. Which corner was that? Turn 2
that was for Max. I think that's exactly where he lost the chance of pole position in last year's qualifying as well, with a very similar snap as he got in towards the apex there. That'll be why he was quite as far down as he was on Hülkenberg in the first sector. Still, Nico has the best first sector. Hülkenberg in 2nd place. Perez in 3rd. It shows what a great lap that was in the Haas. Others still out there. Alonso's on a flyer right now, but not able to match Hülkenberg's first sector.
Russell gets a competitive lap time on the board. Ish goes up to 17th on the medium compound tyre after his woes at the start of this session. Only Gasly, Zhou and Nick De Vries are behind him. De Vries having a bit of a struggle to the start of this session.
My hands of eyes got stuck as well, again through the last corner.
Oh! Big incident there for the Haas, coming through the right-hander of 12, and that is, I think that's Nico Hülkenberg. Red flag immediately out. Nico Hülkenberg is moving. He's facing the wrong way. His Haas teammate Kevin Magnussen drives by him, but it's exactly, I think, where Nick De Vries had the spin, but this time Nico Hülkenberg finds the wall.
I think it's in the first sector where Hülkenberg stopped, actually. I think it's in a faster corner than De Vries was off. That's why he's done quite as much damage as he has to the car. Is it coming through turn 2 or 3 for Hülkenberg, who was just launching into another fast lap, and he's splattered the Haas against the wall on the outside. It's gone backwards into it.
And he's getting out of that Haas though, so that's good to see. But certainly the front right of that car taking a hit. Let's have a look and see what happened, Jolien.
Yeah, so he's gone through turn 1. He's accelerating now through 2. Then he's arcing his way through 3. Gets wide, gets on the slippy stuff. Backs it into the wall. Right front, then in the right rear took a hit as well. And it is, yes, coming through turn 3. The car's just let go. He got wide. It looks really slippy when you get out wide. And Hulkenberg, who's been the star so far...
I lost it.
Lost it.
Yep. Couldn't have said it better, unfortunately, for Nico Hulkenberg. So that was in the early part of the lap. Red flag is out, but the time continues to count down, as this is a practice session, so about 25 minutes left. Gunther Steiner sitting on the pit wall, the team principal of Haas, not looking too impressed at that. Work to do for the mechanics and engineers then to get that out a little bit later for FP2, but hopefully... he's not completely totaled the car, but a bit of damage on the rear, and certainly that front right needs to be seen to. Verstappen then fastest ahead of Hulkenberg, Perez, Magnussen in 4th, and Albon the top 5. Christian.
Jolyon, quick question for you. I went out onto the circuit just before the session and you could see the heat haze on the circuit. It was unbelievable. It's the biggest heat haze I've ever seen in my limited experience of going around Formula 1 tracks. But for those casually into Formula 1 and new to Formula 1, you think... gorgeous sunny day. It is 30 degrees Celsius on the ground here in Miami. New track surface, the track looks blisteringly hot, and yet the drivers are reporting lack of grip. Why is that?
Well, I think it's just down to the tarmac, and a lot of the time when you have a newly surfaced track, it's very smooth. You're not getting any level of roughness and contact for the tyres. You're just sort of skating on the surface of a new tarmac that's smooth. Sometimes has some oils left in it as well. The residual oils can make it a little bit more slippery. And probably you're right, the heat out there as well. When you're on a soft tyre, there's given as much as it did for Hulkenberg, and then he's going into another flyer. He's probably lost the best of those tyres, and he's trying to lean on the car, trying to find a little bit more, and he's overcooked it on the track that's already pretty unforgiving if you get offline. It's probably a combination of everything that's making the lives of all the drivers out there pretty hard right now.
Yeah, I mean, both drivers at McLaren reporting their lack of grip. We obviously saw the moments for Alex Albon and who else? There was another moment earlier, wasn't there? It slipped my mind, but it felt like it was Nick de Vries. Yeah, it felt like a matter of time before one of them hit the wall, because, as I say, the walls are so unforgiving, as they are at any street circuit, but in that tight middle sector of the lap, the walls are so unforgiving, and with a lack of grip, it's a nightmare scenario on free practice 1. And let's not forget, Jolyon, as well, a circuit that a lot of these drivers will be driving for the first time.
Yeah, Hulkenberg will be one of them. He's done such a good job with that flying lap to split the Red Bulls. It's really strong for him. He's done 14 laps around this place. But in the end, he's made a mistake that's going to cost him a lot more than his second place is. A lot of damage to the Haas. That'll need some extensive repairs. And they've got a new floor on the car as well. Haas this weekend, have they got an extra part? Is Hulkenberg going to be now moved to an older spec? For what it's worth, that newer spec looks pretty quick right now. So all of these are considerations that a crash in FP1, yes, it's only the first practice and you can build up and have another 2 hours of practice time, but a lot of the time they have some more severe consequences. You know, the sound you can hear is another replay of the Haas backing into the wall, and it was just a little oversteer earlier on in the corner. Just moved him a little bit wider, and then he kept his foot in and lost it completely.
He certainly did. Well, the tractor is on track and taking Nico Hulkenberg's stricken Haas away. Christian, I'm wondering actually if you can find out how much damage Nick de Vries' AlphaTauri took when he had his little spin, because he came into the pits and never really wandered back out again. So de Vries, especially with this red flag, under a lot of pressure already coming into this session after a bit of a disaster Baku, trying to have a clean weekend of it. So far not going de Vries' way either. Again, another man who has not raced this track.
Hulkenberg, when he got out the car, went straight to go and have a look at the extent of the damage on the rear and punched the air in frustration when he saw that he'd whacked it. I wonder if that's him knowing, upgrade on the car. And if you're a team principal, you're in the engineering briefing this morning, you're quite excited about having some new parts on the car. Haas and Ferrari are the two teams with significant upgrades this weekend to the floor, which is the most sensitive area. You've got to be just saying, look, it's a street circuit, the walls are right there. If you damage this, we're all scuppered for the weekend. And I wonder if Hulkenberg has just looked at that and thought, I might be back to the old spec for the rest of the weekend. We'll keep an eye on it. It looks like actually the front right was the one that took the biggest whack, but certainly Hulkenberg very, very frustrated as he left that.
Christian has news, I hear.
I do have news. George Russell has a new steering rack. So the reason I saw plenty of people huddling round the car is because they've completely replaced the steering rack on George Russell's Mercedes. So let's see when this session resumes whether George Russell will be any more comfortable, because as we heard, if you were listening at the very start of the session, he basically said, guys, this isn't worth it, I need to come in even if it takes half an hour because this is pointless. And the second thing was regards to the floor at Haas and wondering whether or not this spin that Haas have had might well be a symptom of getting used to a new floor. I just wonder whether that new floor has survived this. Jolien just mentioned that it's a big upgrade for Haas. Well, whether they will now be able to keep it on Nico Hulkenberg's car for the rest of the weekend remains to be seen. And while I was getting that information, Harry, I understand you sent me some homework, which I can only apologise I missed. What was that?
That's all right. I just wondered what was going on with Nick de Vries and how much damage he took in his very similar incident to Nico Hulkenberg, although he kept it out of the wall a lot better and it was further around the lap. But he came into the pits and never really had a wander back out again. And obviously he's a bit under pressure for track time, especially after Baku. So just wondered what was going on with his car. When you
Leave it with me. I shall endeavour to find out, because I'm next door to AlphaTauri, so let's have a little wander. I'll report back.
When you get a moment, Christian. Thank you very much. 19 minutes on the clock, still going down under red flag conditions here in Miami for this free practice 1 session, and everybody back into the pits after an incident for Nico Hulkenberg coming into turn 2 and 3, hitting the barrier, facing the wrong way in his Haas after setting a blistering lap time on the soft tyre, bumped down to second in the end, just 0.3 back from Max Verstappen, also on the soft tyre. Then it's Perez and Magnussen, the top 4, all on softs. Albon, Leclerc, Alonso, Hamilton, Ocon, Piastri, the top 10. Valtteri Bottas in the Alfa Romeo, Jolien. I have written that down because I've been a bit confused about Bottas and his pace the last couple of races. Is it purely down to the car not quite being there, or has Bottas kind of fallen off the cliff a little bit? Because a great first time out in Bahrain, getting 8th place, but since then, that Alfa Romeo has been nowhere. Yeah,
I mean, you and me the same. I think we're both confused about Valtteri. The Alfa Romeo was good in pre-season testing, looked pretty sharp in Bahrain. Bottas got in the points straight away, had a really decent race in Bahrain, got an 8th place result. Since then, he's just been languishing at the back of the field. He's finished 18th, 11th and 18th. The 11th was out of, I think, 12 finishes or 11 finishes in Melbourne. So it's really been tough for Bottas. But what I'm actually is right now he's sitting in 16th. Zhou is 19th. Obviously the Alfa Romeo car is not working well, despite maybe somehow it was a bit of a Bahrain special. There's not been extensive upgrades to the other cars for them to fall back this much. It's obviously pretty tight in that area, so losing a couple of tenths makes a big difference. But I'm just surprised at how well Zhou is doing compared to Bottas. Let's not forget, Zhou's not really highly rated, but it's just his comparisons to Bottas make us rate him a little bit more highly, and they're neck and neck a lot of the time. Bottas is a multiple Grand Prix winner. I feel like he's underperforming at the moment in that car, but it's really difficult to tell.
Well, it's 2 apiece at the moment between him and his teammate Zhou Guanyu in qualifying and the race, 2-2. Session has restarted, by the way, so we'll get about 17 minutes of on-track action. The Red Bulls and the Mercedes were first out of the pit lane, and Max Verstappen leading Lewis Hamilton and getting a little bit feisty on track as they come into the break. And Hamilton trying to find a way through as they head into the final corner, of the turn 1, I should say, and round they go. But Verstappen out, we'll get about 17 minutes then. Christian, I hear you have completed your homework.
I've completed my homework. I'm good like that, Harry. I was always a teacher's pet at school. And I'm at AlphaTauri as we speak. Yuki Tsunoda was straight back out when the red flag conditions were lifted. But Nick de Vries, I can see his car now. I don't think there was any damage. If there was, we don't know about it. But the back and the front is off Nick de Vries' car, and there are quite a few people huddling round it. And what's notable is, you know, when we were talking about George Russell a little bit earlier, it was clearly quite frantic, people trying to get him back out quickly. Here, the car's in bits and it's all a lot more casual. It doesn't look like a Formula 1 car that's going to be going out the garage anytime soon. And you just think, we've already been talking in the programme, haven't we, about Nick de Vries. You know, we've said that Logan Sargent could do with putting a weekend together. There's been such flashes of pace from Logan Sargent. We haven't seen those from Nick de Vries, really, if we're being honest. We've got another street circuit, another new circuit for him to learn, and already his car's in bits as they try and make him happier in it, and he's missing out on valuable run time. It's just already a less than ideal start to the weekend.
It really is, and I think it also highlights Yuki Tsunoda certainly stepping up in performance this year, especially the last two Grand Prix, points back to back, and there was a lot of pressure on Tsunoda coming into the season to kind of fill that void of Pierre Gasly. Looks like he's done that, and Nick de Vries struggling with rookie mistakes.
I've been very impressed with Tsunoda, how he's been able to put so much pressure on de Vries on the other side of the garage. Honestly, I thought de Vries would come in and probably lead the team the way that he did it. He did so well in Monza in the Williams last year. He's got a proven track record, winning in FE, F2. He's quite experienced, 27 for a rookie. That's quite. He's got, you know, a few years working with Mercedes in the sim, working with Hamilton and Russell last year as third driver. Plenty of mileage. And I really thought he'd come in and do well, but Tsunoda seems to have really upped his game with a bit of pressure of new blood in the team. We didn't see a replay of de Vries' crash from the outside.
No.
It didn't look to me like he hit the wall. If he did, it was very, very slight. So I do wonder if there's actually a car issue other than him hitting the wall for that one. We never got an external shot.
Possibly. Sounds like more homework for Christian Hugel, but we'll see. 14 minutes left for this free practice one session. Verstappen is still the fastest. Speaking of Yuki Tsunoda, he's just popped it up into 8th. He's training now with Daniel Ricciardo's former trainer, performance coach, Michael Italiano, and unlike what you see perhaps in the Drive to Survive show, Tsunoda has had a bit of a turnaround when it comes to working out and fitness and having the right diet. He seems to have got that side of it nailed down now, moved closer to the team's base in Faenza. But it's all a bit of a change for AlphaTauri at the moment. Franz Tost last weekend announcing that he will be off at the end of the year. Laura Mekies from Ferrari coming in. But Tost is always of the storyline that you've got to give a rookie, which Nick de Vries is, 3 seasons until they find their true pace.
I don't know if the Red Bull bosses would agree with the AlphaTauri boss, though. Famously ruthless at Red Bull. Helmut Marko, a lot of the time, wouldn't even give drivers a chance in a Toro Rosso back in the day or an AlphaTauri. Then they get in, do half a season and just be hiked out. Really, really ruthless. And that's why the pressure will be even more on de Vries, I think, because we know how Red Bull can be. Verstappen upped his pace on the last lap at the top of the tyres. Now has 8 tenths in hand over Hülkenberg, who's still second, and Perez, who's still third. Alonso and Ocon just improving in 4th and 5th. Still can't beat Nico Hülkenberg's time, though.
No, it really was a great lap time as Lance Stroll in the Aston Martin starts a fast lap on the soft tyre, makes the braking point into turn 1 and away he goes in the green Aston Martin. There's the sun that beats down the palm trees, slightly wave about in the wind. It's nearly 30 degrees air temperature, nearly 50 degrees track temperature, 46% humidity as well. A lot of the drivers from last year say how tough this track was, purely because of not just how it was the layout, but also the humidity and dealing with the heat after the race. And Stroll making his way round now. 12 minutes on the clock.
It is a humid part of the world. Tough enough in the paddock, let alone when you're strapped in the car and all togged up in your overalls, balaclava, your fireproofs and everything. Does get very hot in there.
Piastri just got up to 5th in the McLaren on a soft set of tyres. Gasly, I was wondering what he was doing down in the Alpine, was languishing down in 19th, but he's coming out now on an out lap, so we'll see what Gasly can do. He's coming out on the soft tyre, so we're going to get some soft tyre running in Hay at the end of this free practice 1 session. It sounds like we might get an extra team come Silverstone, Jolien. Well, not quite an extra team, but we know that Brad Pitt and Lewis Hamilton are working on a Formula 1 movie. And apparently, I think it was blown a little bit out of proportion. There was talk of Brad Pitt lining up on the grids in an altered Formula 1 car for filming purposes. It's actually going to be a slightly altered Formula 2 car that has been designed by Mercedes and being overseen by Hamilton's side of the garage, but it's not actually going to be on track at all when the other cars are. It's going to be running in between sessions. But that's a nice sign for Formula One, embracing even more of the world of America and Hollywood coming through. Brad Pitt on the grid.
Yep. Is F1 meets showbiz coming to Silverstone? That's the way the world's going. I'm a traditionalist. I'm here for the sport. I don't care if Brad Pitt's there filming or not.
What about new teams, though? Would you want some new teams on the grid?
Yeah, but not Brad Pitt in an F2 car.
No.
But
would you actually? There are the entries are open for 2025 and 6 plus, and there's some interest. Notably, the biggest from Andretti Cadillac, and there's been a couple of teams as well from Asia that are interested, especially in the last week, announcing their interest in Formula One. New teams on the grid, though, a good thing for Formula One. I think it'd be great. More cars, the better.
Oh, of course. Yeah, the more cars, the more action, fundamentally. Audi are coming in, but they're taking over the Alfa Romeo team. So that will be a more competitive team coming in. Surely Audi will be hoping to be fighting at the front. So that's great news. That's coming in 2026. We've got a little bit of time still for that one. It's great to hear Andretti's the team that's been rumoured for a while. We're racing in America, and I'm sure we'll hear more about Andretti this weekend again, and their now long-term ambition to be there in F1 hasn't happened as yet. I'm up for more teams. I think the existing teams are the ones generally more against it, because they might have to split the pie a little bit more. It's good competition, and 20 cars I think is the minimum acceptable in Formula One. But I grew up watching 22 cars most often. Sometimes it was up to 26 when Caterham, Marussia.
That's what I want to get back to. Caterham, Marussia, and HRT, they were on the grid.
So long as they're competitive, though. So long as they're competitive.
But isn't that what the cost cap ensures now?
Ideally, the cost cap is there for that reason. Many teams can't get up to the cost cap, though, so it doesn't completely ensure it. It just means that you can't blast way past it if you're some of the big guns. You could still come in and try and run it on an absolute shoestring and scrabble around. I think there's generally a bit more money to go around. There's more sponsorship coming into Formula One. If you look at title sponsor for Haas, for example, this season, bringing a little bit more to that team. Formula One's in a healthy place, and that's also why there's teams wanting to join and get in on the action.
Yeah, so many PRs and track activation going on around this Miami Grand Prix circuit. Almost as much work going off the track as there is on it. The sound you're hearing is the home hero in his Williams, Logan Sargent, making his way around. Currently down in 18th spot.
Leclerc came through and went second, and then Sainz went through and went second. So the Ferrari is now second and third. Sainz ahead of Leclerc. That's on the soft tyre as well, which means everyone out there has now run the soft, with the exception of the two Mercedes, who are now 17th and 18th. Russell ahead of Hamilton, and Hamilton's been out there on another run. So Mercedes doing things a little differently. I think they're into some long runs, actually, looking at the times right now, mixing their run plan up completely. De Vries is at the bottom of the times, hasn't run the softs either, and we know he's in the garage with his car in bit, so that's not going to happen in probably before the end of the session. But Verstappen leads half a second in hand over those Ferraris.
Yeah, well, you mentioned Nick De Vries there. Christian's got AlphaTauri news.
Yeah, so we understand there was a little bit of damage on Nick De Vries' AlphaTauri. The team say they're working to repair.
Is the car okay? Yeah, it's all good. I just completely lost it. Very strange.
Pierre Gasly on the radio, just running out wide there, but a very strange reason for it, according to him in the cockpit.
Yes, sorry, Harry. Nick De Vries, AlphaTauri, saying that the car was damaged. We don't fully know how severely or what exactly the damage was, but I mentioned a little earlier that unlike when George Russell's mechanics were working frantically to try and get him back out, clearly the fact that it was much more leisurely suggested they were never going to get him back out for this session. So yeah, almost no running for Nick De Vries in FP1. There was some damage, and the team are working to repair the car for FP2. Compared to when you last came to me, it's in even more bits now. There's barely any of it on it. So yeah, a big repair job by the looks of it, or at least a big set of changes going in to Nick De Vries' AlphaTauri in time for FP2, where he will be desperate to get some good running.
We never did see that crash, and we never saw him rejoin either, which was investigated briefly and then cleared as not dangerous. But something must have happened there around that, and maybe he did just tap the wall and that was the cause for his lengthy stay. But he obviously drove the car back to the garage under normal AlphaTauri power. So tough one for De Vries, who will lose more track time, be more on the back foot this weekend, and it's a track that he doesn't really know either. So it doesn't rain but it pours at the moment for him. For Leclerc, it's looking all right. Fastest first sector of anyone on this lap. Hits the brakes coming down to the left-hander at turn 11. End of the first DRS zone. Comes past the corner where De Vries hit the wall earlier on. Takes a late apex to the right-hand side. Now slows it down for 14. Jumps the curbs quite nicely through 14 and 15. Opens himself up a little bit through turn 16. And this is a much better lap for Leclerc. Toe-to-toe with Verstappen through 2 sectors.
It's looking good for that new floor at Ferrari. They're bringing that in for this weekend. Sainz currently in second. And we're still following Leclerc into the braking zone. Slings it into the left-hander at the end. Personal best in the middle sector, making his way around now the final right-hand kick before he crosses the line. What's it going to be for Leclerc? He slots up into second, losing a little bit of time to Verstappen in that final sector, about 2.5 tenths in total from the fastest lap time, which is a 1:35 from Verstappen.
Yeah, so a couple of tenths in the final sector, which is basically one corner and a fair amount of straight line, and that's where Red Bull, particularly with that DRS, are very strong. And Leclerc improved to go second, narrows the gap to the Red Bull, but still the straight line speed of the Red Bull keeping Verstappen on the front, and Max has done a pretty good time as well. He's a full second clear of Sergio Perez so far. Alonso fourth, ahead of Hulkenberg, who's still fifth. Gasly had a huge moment, as Christian was talking, down at turn 4, turned it in, big opposite lock as the back came round, and it wasn't too far away from doing a Hulkenberg, but caught it. Now he's done a lap and he's gone sixth, which is decent for Alpine.
Yep, Carlos Sainz just catching his Ferrari as well in the early parts of the lap. Little bit of a twitch on the steering. We had a yellow flag briefly as well a few moments ago for Alex Albon. That was a spin coming into the final corner, I think it was, but he managed to get back going again, making use of the runoff. The Ferraris, though, in second and third. Carlos Sainz a couple of tenths back from his teammate and struggling to keep that Ferrari on track at the moment, running over the red and white curbing. The sound you're hearing is on board with Carlos Sainz coming into turn 1. The right-hander, and just losing the rear end a little bit, has to get off the throttle and allow the Red Bull past.
Slithered off the racing line and slithered off the road in the end, didn't he? So still slippery out there. 1 minute 30.5 is the best lap from Max Verstappen, championship leader. Red Bull looking so strong. Last year, 1 minute 31.0, so they're half a second quicker this year compared to last year. Completely new surface. 14-15 looks a little bit more jumpable as well, the chicane, and not a great deal quicker.
No, well, just under 3 minutes left of this free practice 1 session. The two Mercedes of Russell and Hamilton, currently down in 18th and 19th, but are both now about to start flying laps on a soft set of tyres. In fact, nearly everybody's on a soft set except for Piastri, Magnussen. At the moment, they're in 10th and 11th, but Hamilton then begins his flyer lap. So far, so good through the first sector, keeps it nice and tidy, manages to avoid keeping it out of the right-hander of turn 3, where we saw Nico Hulkenberg find the wall, which is the reason for the red flag earlier on.
Hamilton all over the curbs through the first sector, looking fairly confident, able to attack them in the Mercedes. Now can squeeze on the throttle. He's within a tenth of Max Verstappen through that first sector. Took a lot of apex curve, got right up to the inside part of the circuit through 5, 6, 7. Now he's flat out down towards turn 11. Big step on the brakes coming up.
A little bit of a slide coming out of the corner, but keeps it all planted. Ocon gets himself up into 7th. Perez now down in 8th, about a second off his teammate. So Perez needing to try and find a little bit of pace before the end of this session if he wants to get up there with his teammate. Russell finding time in the first sector as well, though not much, 11 thousandths of a second, but it's something.
That's on Verstappen. So both Mercedes are now flying. Hamilton does the fastest middle sector of anyone right at the death of this session. 90 seconds to go. Leclerc now does the fastest middle sector. Mini qualifying at the end of FP1 as Hamilton flashes into the final corner. Gets on the throttle, squirms it out, and will head to the line. Can Hamilton get to the top?
We wait and see. He crosses the line. He does do so. It's a 1:33 for Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes with a minute left of free practice one in Miami. Goes fastest, 2/10 clear of Verstappen. But what can his teammate George Russell do? Overall best in the middle sector, down the long back straight. We ride on board with George Russell down through the gears into the left-hander. Foot to the floor now, round the final couple of corners, the quick left-hander and the right-hander at the final corner across the line for George Russell. Can he pip his teammate? He can by 2/10. This isn't qualifying, it's only free practice, but it's a Mercedes 1-2. Russell leads a 1:31.25, the fastest lap time.
And Leclerc's gone third, which shuffles Verstappen from top about 30 seconds ago down to fourth right at the end of this session. No doubt the track's getting better at the end. We know that it started off very slippery with every lap that passes, particularly on the soft tyre. The rubber comes up, the grip level comes to the drivers, and Mercedes were bolting on brand new softs there right at the end. So they definitely had a bit of a grip advantage. Still 4/10 up on Verstappen, and particularly George Russell. Only 16 laps for George in this session, and surely he's going to end it fastest. So that's a remarkable turnaround for the guy that needed a steering rack change at the start of this one. Spent 30 minutes in the pits, would jump out, and as the checker flag waves, Mercedes have a 1-2. Who'd have thought it?
Who'd have thought it? It is George Russell with the fastest lap time. Let's hear from him.
Oh my word.
Oh.
I'm trying to get out of the way of everyone.
Hey, Fabio, it's very busy there.
And coming a cropper into 14 and 15, that really tight left-hander and right-hander George Russell just trying to get out of the way and then trying to move his way past the Ferrari in front. We also see Logan Sargent finding the runoff area but manages to keep it going. Big snap on the steering wheel but keeps it pointed in a straight line. Checker flag, though, is out for this first free practice session to kickstart track action here for the Miami Grand Prix, the first of 3 races in America on the Formula One calendar. We'll also head to the Circuit of the Americas in Austin, Texas, and Las Vegas for the first time, and a bespokely made track for Formula One later on in the year. But Miami gets the first bit of treatment, and it's Russell with a 1:31, 2/10 in front of Lewis Hamilton. Leclerc, Verstappen, Sainz, the top 5. Gasly, Alonso, Stroll, Hülkenberg, Ocon, the top 10. Perez down 11th in the end in front of Piastri, Magnussen, Bottas, Albon, the top 15. Norris, Zhou, Tsunoda, Sargent and De Vries with issues, and that car in pieces in the garage in his AlphaTauri after a little skirmish against the wall. We didn't think it looked as bad as Nico Hülkenberg's crash, which brought out the red flag, but we didn't see any proper replays of Nick De Vries' crash, so not quite sure at the extent as to how he hit the wall, but certainly not the best start for Nick De Vries, the rookie, one of the rookies in the field. Christian.
Well, there were some wry smiles down at Mercedes as Lewis Hamilton and George Russell were setting their times. I mean, let's be honest, this is a team with multiple world championships. They are not going to be getting carried away with being quickest in practice. But yesterday, there wasn't too much optimism for Mercedes that they were going to be too close. And they end the session with smiles on faces down at Mercedes. And as you say, Jolyon, George Russell, who was in the pits right early doors complaining he could barely drive the car and needed to have his steering rack changed. Well, bit of a rags to riches story for him, isn't it? I guess you could say.
Oh, very good. Rags to riches. What a debut.
Can only apologise.
I mean, class from Hugill, class from Russell from that session. Really good to do so few laps on the circuit that's slippery as well. Walls right on the side, crash for Hülkenberg, little tap of the wall for De Vries. It's very easy to try and make up for lost time and push too hard too soon and give your team more of a headache through the weekend. But Russell, a couple of tenths up on Hamilton, and just for the Mercedes team, that's a great start to it.
Encouraging start as well, Jolyon, for Haas, despite the incident for Nico Hülkenberg. Showed a huge amount of pace. In fact, he didn't get obviously another lap time in, but it was still enough for ninth come the end of the checkered flag in that free practice 1 session.
Well, it's encouraging. It just depends if they've damaged the new floor that's on the car that looked like it's working really well. Magnussen 13th in the end is not terrible either in the other Haas. That's right in the midfield fight, but Hülkenberg up in ninth with that flyer separated the 2 Red Bulls when they went on soft tyres as well. So really good from Hülkenberg. Perez on the softs, he couldn't match him when he went. So the red flag then stopped Checo going again, but it just depends for Haas if they can get that sorted.
Well, certainly the Mercedes looking quick, then the Ferraris and the Red Bulls right up there as well. Pierre Gasly sneaking into the top 6 in his Alpine after being in the pits for quite a lot of that session towards the rear of the field. His teammate Esteban Ocon rounds out the top 10. The two Aston Martins in 7th and 8th as well. Sturdy starts for them, about a second off the pace, just over in that free practice 1 session, which was a little bit blighted with incident, of course, for Nico Hulkenberg and Nick De Vries. The rookies getting up to speed, but that just about does it for this first free practice 1 session. George Russell on top ahead of Lewis Hamilton, Charles Leclerc. My thanks to Jolyon Palmer, Christian Hugel down in the pits. I've been Harry Benjamin. Thank you for listening. Do join us again for FP2 at 10:25 on Sports Extra. We've got Rugby League coverage on the way, and this has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.